like to start with, would you have any comments with the video that was just played on some of the dragons that were in there?
Yeah, lots of kinds, lots of different kinds. So dragons, there's so many different types of reptilians that people generally confuse a dragon as kind of just a generic thing. Like, humans pretty much look, other than a variation in color and some minor features, like most non-terrestrials say, humans, you can't, other than some are in different colors, you can't recognize one from another. Dragons aren't that way. Dragons are quite different. So there's a lot of different species over all the time that humans have been on Earth. And most people think they all look like they have an idea in their head. Like the most typical is either the Chinese dragon or like the one in the Lord of the Rings. But there's a massive amount of different types of dragons, and then species that are kind of thrown into the lump of dragons because they're reptilian, like the vril, which aren't really a dragon, they're reptilian, kind of, sort of. They're kind of a cross between a reptile and a bat and something else. I don't know what else, but they have a proboscis on their head. And then you also have like the sleazaks, which are kind of reptilian. They're reptilian, but they're not dragons, but they're thrown into the lump of dragons. And then you have the many different kinds of dragons all over the Earth and all over in the Orion Syndicate, for example, there's quite a few. And then throughout all of Draco, which is a massive constellation, most of the constellations are associated with certain stars for a reason. The stars actually talk to each other. And then on top of it, the species within a constellation tend to be of a type. And in the case of the Orion, the Draconian constellation Draco, they're reptilian and they're dragons mostly. So there's a wide range of dragons, and they vary vastly in size. If you're going to include vril, you go from 18 inches to 36 inches. If you go up to the gamma draconians and some of them, you're talking 650 feet high. So there's a lot of confusion in what a dragon is. So that was a great video. It wrapped up, it showed a big chunk of it.
Well, that's great. Thank you. That you were talking about the Orion War on the Gamma Draconians with Alpha Dracos. Is that right?
Yeah. So when the Alpha Draco came to Gamma Draconia, which is a massive planet, it orbits a large star that is much bigger than the star in this solar system. It's about nearly closing in on a red giant. It's kind of reddish, pinkish purple. So it's kind of a mixture between a red giant and a blue giant, which is kind of halfway between the size of a red giant and a blue giant. So that a blue giant is vastly bigger than a red giant. It's kind of halfway in between. And then due to certain elements in it, it has a kind of a pinkish tinge. So the planet Gamma Draconia has a orbit that's extremely elliptical, and as it comes in, it slows its orbit down, and as it goes, so days get up to 32 hours long in the summer, and then as it goes out, they get shorter in the winter. And so because also it's winter, because you're further from the sun, of course, and so the days and the years are significantly different. But the size of Gamma Draconia is roughly about the size of Jupiter. Between Jupiter and the sun, it's about halfway between the two, and it's a massive planet. And in the war with the Alpha Draconians, they lost not just from the planet, but from other planets in the system, the solar system. They lost a total of 650 billion. But it's the reason why the only gold Alpha Draconian is Enlil herself, because they wiped out all the golds. So they still, the Alpha Draco, which are a dragon-like species, they're pretty much, for those that are still serving the Queen and the Empire, have their wings are vestigial, kind of like a penguin or an ostrich. They can't fly anymore with them. But a Gamma Draconian is usually about 650 feet tall. They don't have a class structure anymore. But certain types of dragons on Gamma Draconia have certain attributes. So as they mixed like humans have on Earth, where you have black and white and red and yellow mixing, certain people have certain characteristics. So in a Gamma Draconian, for example, the blue would be the ones that can breathe ice or very, very cold temperatures, so it freezes things, where the red can breathe flame. And the typical lifespan is about 1 billion years, and they're about 650 feet tall for a male. And so one thing very unique about the Gamma Draconians is that they're 3-sexed. They are not like humans that are binary sexed or have 2 sexes. They're actually trisexed, where they have a male, a female, and a brood. And they came near extinction because the Alpha Draconians realized that the brood, which is the 3rd sex, so a male and female will mate, and they'll have, the female will carry the egg and implant it in the brood, who will make the, kind of like a chicken, the egg can be laid and it won't be fertile. The brood makes it fertile. So the male and the female come together to create the egg in the female. The female then impregnates the brood with the egg. And in any one generation, there's about 10% are broods, which means that if you were to lose all of one sex in that species, or in humans, if you lost all the females, there wouldn't be humans anymore very, very quickly. So you got one generation, right? So same here. So they lost a significant amount, so that now the brood population has worked its way back up to about 8% of the population. So a female-male couple will mate for life, which is a very long time again. But because of the lack of broods, many, many couples will protect the cave where the brood nurses and brings to term, and then lays the fully matured egg that hatches out almost immediately. So they don't have the kind of jealousy, ownership, like, does your husband give you permission to, after he dies, to get married again? Gamma Draconians don't do that, because they have to share the broods. It's an absolute to keep the species going now. So you'll have many, many, many males and females that will guard the caves with the broods really powerfully. And then the broods raise all of the babies. And a baby, a Gamma Draconian is referenced as a child until they're about, you're kind of like in a human teenage terms, like 21 years old would be roughly about 2.5 million years old. You're not really deemed an adult till that point. You're really not knowledgeable of the ways of everything. You're kind of young. So, they look at it that way. So, they defeated the Alpha Draconian, but at a great cost for both sides. The Gamma Draconians nearly went extinct because they lost a they got down to 2% broods, and they came back from that to 8 now. Normally it's 10% per generation. Of course, like in any reptilian species or any species, when you have a huge lack of one sex, the babies will tend to be more that sexed that's missing. So like what's happening in Ukraine or in wars in this world, where you have a large amount of the males are killed off, quite frequently you'll have the species will rebound by having the majority of the next 2 or 3 generations males. And in this case, the majority of the next 2 or 3 generations were broods. By majority, I mean 20, 30%. which is still not high, so but extremely high for a gamma draconian. So that's kind of a bit on the history of gamma draconia, that type of dragon. And you can see the star system of the Draco Constellation, and you can find all the stars. They're pretty much A through Z, you know, so the Alpha Draco, or the tip of the nose of the dragon, so to speak. Gamma Draconians are kind of down around the abdominal section, if you count the constellation, the way they show it in most star maps. Thank you.
Wow, that was good information there. Okay, so what does an actual dragon look like? Is it scaly like we think they are? Or we've heard maybe they're more of a soft touch, or can you tell us more about that?
All of them are pretty much scaly because they're reptilian. Not all are cold or warm-blooded, or there's other kinds of blooded besides cold and warm, actually. But they're mostly warm-blooded, but mostly scaly. If you look at Omicrons, they're called dragon moth because they're kind of like a moth a bit. The gamma draconians are what we call kind of full-figured, where their bodies are very robust. They're not like the Scythians or the Nagas, like the Chinese dragons and all that, are very long and thin. Gamma draconians are much more kind of like peach dragon, very stocky, you know, solid. And, you know, their wings, they're very powerful. They can fly. A black dragon, if it's still a pure black dragon, can fly at Mach 8. So, you know, when they tuck, they come close to the ground and open their wings, so they can hit Mach 8 as they come down and maintain that speed. So they're capable of extreme speeds because of the size of the gravity of the planet. They use that to their advantage, of course. And then if you look at, like I said, Scythians, Nagas, which are typically, you know, the dragons most people know. Like the Scythians are pretty much what you'd call a Chinese dragon, also known like in Central America, they're long and thin. And the Nagas are that way too, which are what you find in the Indus Valley region in India. So there's dragons all over the earth, and people say, well, there had to be dragons. Of course, there were and there are. But they're not paying attention to the fact it's like a dragon is a dragon as a dragon. It's not really true, because you have cold, warm, and other kind of blooded. And you have ones that are long and thin, and you have ones that have more than one head, and you have ones that are kind of feathered, like feathered serpent quetzalcoatl kind of creatures, which are kind of a meld towards the Omicron Draco, which are the dragon moth species. So there's quite a bit. And then if you want to throw in the raptors, people think raptors are dragons. Not really, because they don't have wings at all. But, you know, okay, they're reptiles, if you want to call that. Same with the vril. They're 1.5 to 3 feet tall, and they're reptilian, but they're cold-blooded and they don't have wings at all. So that really, for me, a dragon, you kind of sort of at least have vestigial wings, sort of, you know, to some degree to be called a dragon. Otherwise, you're kind of just like a snake or reptilian kind of lizard creature or something. Go ahead.
Okay. You were talking about the red dragon. Can you tell us more about all the other colors? You said there's a lot of other colors out there, like the blue, and you said blue and red.
Gamma draconian, each color on gamma draconia had certain qualities. So originally, before they started to interbreed, and then even when they interbreed, if you have like a black, which are very long lived, very powerful, and the highest, fastest flying, those are the blacks. They intermarry. So if you were to have a black and a blue dragon, which are the ice breathers, it would be a fast dragon that could breathe ice. You have green dragons, which are very healing and also good at helping plants and things like that to grow. You have red dragons that breathe fire. You have gold dragons used to be the elite. They don't do a class structure there anymore, so they don't have that anymore. The white were actually the pastors, so to speak, If you want to call it different religion, of course, but different, way of looking at God and creator and Christ and all of that. But the ones that kept the spiritual traditions were the whites. And then you also have coral dragons, and the coral dragons are the ones that were always had a great sense of humor and kind of try to keep things light and not take life so seriously that you get bogged down and get all upset when things don't go your way. And then there's also certain other kind of unique-ish colors that happen rarely, like kind of a turquoise kind of dragon that is interdimensional, capable of going between universes and between parallels, being universes, of course, but also interdimensional capable when they can go between densities and all kinds of things. So those are more rare. And of course, then they're more valued. And as they got interbreeded, sometimes you'll have one being with many characteristics in it. And so in the Alpha Draconians, their class structure is primarily organized towards power. The goals, like I said, used to be the leadership. Now the only one that's pure gold is Enlil, and then her daughter Nana Enlil is half gold. And then you have the warrior class, which are kind of green and gold, and some of them brownish and that kind of stuff. So it depends on the species, how they look at it. Different species look at it different ways with the different dragons and reptilian groups. But, the Alpha Draco, which got in league with Sophia quite a long time ago, realized recently what they sacrificed for power. And so some of them would come back to God and Christ, and by so doing, their wings are no longer vestigial, and they have the iridescent scales again, and full wings, and their stature is growing. They're kind of looked, because if you look at a Gamma Draconian, they're on an average about 450 feet high. A Gamma Draconian is on the average 12 to 18 feet high. You go, well, you're kind of a runt, aren't you? So kind of small. The Gamma Draconians look at that is because you served evil. You got squished down. Humans have done the same thing. They used to be hundreds of feet tall and live thousands and thousands, essentially eternal. And now they're squished down and short-lived. And so the Alpha Draconians have realized the same thing. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Carolyn, did you have a question?
Yes. So, Jean, we've been trained in our cultures that dragons are bad. So I have two questions. So the first question is that one. So how are they good? And my second question is, do they breathe fire? And if they do, how do they do that?
Well, just like people, you have good people, you have bad people. I mean, you've got people on Earth that people think are people. Human beings are not, they're mankind. Like the WEF and the Davos group and the Rothschilds and all those, which are intermixed and interbred with Alpha Draco and other creatures that are incredibly evil, and in what they do. I'm not one to judge, so in what they do, everybody has through God and Christ can come to service to God and get rid of the evil within them and get realigned to the creator of all things. But just like people, and just like certain groups, like you had the various empires on the earth that became incredibly evil, so essentially. So if you look at the Aztecs, they would have holidays in which they would sacrifice over 10,000 people. The blood ran down the street 2 feet deep. So if that's not evil, I don't know what you wouldn't call, what else can you call that? And so would you say that all humans are evil because that one group, that one empire was that? You've had really good empires like Lemuria that were destroyed by Atlantis. And so you have this war of good and evil, and the dragons are the same. And the reptilians are the same. There's good and there's evil. And within a group, there's now, like in the Alpha Draco, a fifth column that's about half the species now has broken away. So in the Dark Fleet, half the Dark Fleet is now in service to the Alliance and trying to help humanity break free of the bondage and the human trafficking and trying to rescue those that have been trafficked. So there's, you know, a lot of misunderstandings. I've got a bunch of things pulled up. I don't have. If you give me a screen share, I can show many different types of dragons I kind of pulled up here. So not all can, like Alpha Draco. I don't know any Alpha Draco that can breathe fire. Gamma Draconians, kind of about 30%. Most dragon species, not so much. Reptilian species, hardly ever. So let me see. Let me share screen. Yeah, here we go. So let's share here. So these are the Naga type. As you can see, like I said, they're very long. This is what you tend to see all over India, Laos, Cambodia, the statues and things they make will have that kind of a structure. This is the Omicron Draco. So this is the Romulan Empire symbol, but it's exactly how they look. Their wings are broad, but they have this weird kind of hole in it with claws around the hole. And then their head sits in here and their eyes would be in here. So, and they typically do have a graduation in color where you see these colors that graduate from one side to the other, from usually dark blue to green is kind of or from black to red, for example. So sometimes you'll see the claws filled in, the holes in the wings will be filled in, but sometimes they're actually holes. So here you can see how they look when they fly. So they have this kind of a look here. This is just, showing a planet or something. So don't get confused with that. And then if we go to looking at Scythians, so that, you have, like, this is a Alpha Draco kind of warrior class, kind of typical warrior class. If we go to the Scythians, they look much more like the typical Chinese dragon, but they're also usually aquatic. So this is a typical Scythian, and they do have some wing, but they're also aquatic. They look kind of like a seahorse in the snout area. And so, and they will actually show you the area of the world they're in, pretty much what we call Ukraine. And a lot of Scythian structure in Crimea underneath. There's a lot of Scythian cities and things there. So, this is a very typical Scythian kind of look. This one is similar. That would not all, because if they get extremely aquatic, they won't have the wings at all. It's like a flying fish kind of thing. It can get out of the water and fly, and it can also swim through the water. It's both an air breather and it has kind of like an inner gill structure, so it can breathe through that snout water. So you can, it breathes through there and goes in, and then it has the structure down the side where they excrete the water out. So, and then they have the wings still. So there's many various types of them, of dragons. So that gives you kind of an idea of a few of them there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. What about, I was going to go back to something you said. How would a dragon help plants? I don't see a dragon being able to help a plant. How do they do that?
What they're able to do is they breathe out an energy structure, because if you go back to what Tesla said, everything is energy, which is frequency and vibration. So if you resonate, like, you can actually get a copper staff and wind a copper wire around it and put a pyramidal, like, copper structure on top, and put that in your garden, and it'll actually help your plants grow significantly. The ancient Egyptians used to do that. There's all kinds of this technology. So the dragon, the green dragon, is actually able to exhale a vibrational energy resonant structure that helps plants to grow. It's why on Gamma Draconia, the typical tree is like it used to be on Earth, something a mile high, like you see the stumps of trees like Castle, what is it called? Devil's Tower in Colorado, Castle Rock in southern kind of Front Range Denver area, the big mile high steps all over the Amazon, they're actually the stumps of trees. There's, you know, fossil, I think the website's Fossil University or something. It shows stumps of trees all over the world, and trees on Earth used to be that big until certain giant beings cut them all down. And so the trees on Gamma Draconia are like that. They're over a mile high. And a big part of it, of course, is because of the green dragons that are able to breathe and energize with them such that it nurtures and helps the tree grow.
Oh, that's good. So what was the divine purpose of creating the dragons? I know we have different sections, but was there one specific overall reason for the dragons to be created by God?
Well, the Alpha Draco were created originally. They're called the Zoroastrians in actuality, like the religion. And their purpose was like the Akashic records for Earth, but for the entire universe, to create and keep not create, but create a history, that would be passed down of all of the species and all of creation. And so what they actually wound up doing with that is, with knowledge, of course, comes power. And so they used it to create a powerful empire that was a conquering empire.
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions they want to ask? One thing we were talking about was, I don't know what you can say about it, but what can you tell us about star seeds that were dragons here on Earth? Can you give us any little information on that?
So, like every species, there are beings within a species, or in some case, whole parts of a group, like the Mayans. They say that in the 100, we're not doing that anymore. No, where did all the bodies and the bones go if that's true? You're in a perfect place. A tropical environment's a perfect place to create fossils. There's almost no fossilized human bone at all. They actually ascended. They raptured or ascended during the last cycle of ascension as an entire civilization. A few left behind that say we used to be the Mayans that walked out. Yeah, you're the ones that walked out because you didn't ascend. You couldn't run anything. You didn't have the knowledge to run it. You were not like, there's a lot of people at second density, humans that's still at second density, that aren't yet at third density. When the rapture occurs, they may go to third. Not likely. In most cases, they'll go to fourth and fifth density. And so they'll be left behind as the human race raptures. And then rapture is, of course, negative and positive. In the case of the Alpha Draco, they raptured from third density to fourth and fifth density negative. In human terms, the rapture that's coming up is going to be predominantly the Great Awakening. Usually when a species calls it great, it means positive, which in service to God, which is the case. And so the Gamma Draconian and the species that have ascended beyond sixth density go to non-corporeality, but you still have the energetic genetic structure within what you are. So if you come back, you can either ask God to come back or choose to come back in certain ways. If you ask to come back in service to God or something like that, or if you fall, when you come back into a corporeal body, the energetic genetic structure, even if it's a human baby, will imprint on the baby and change the genetic structure of the baby to some degree, sometimes vastly, and sometimes not so much. It's why the elite have the hybrid structure, the mankind or the bloodlines of Cain, where they mixed it with Alpha Draco, Neanderthal, Cro-Mag, Anunnaki, and a few other species, so that they would have a vessel for their species to come from fifth density down into third density into, because the genetic resonance at fifth density negative would destroy a human body. So they need something they can come into. So what they've been doing, for example, with the queen or king in the case of Victoria's Secret, she's a he, is they jump. The same being has been ruling through all of those since the Norman the Conqueror conquered England. All of that time when the House of Winslow was actually took over and destroyed the House of Windsor and became the House of Windsor, all of that time it's been the same being. It didn't matter which king or which queen it was. Inside that body was the same being. So when the queen just died recently, the Alliance captured that being before it could leave, as it was leaving, and took it off Earth for crimes against humanity. And so you have these, now on both sides, starseeds coming in for the battle between good and evil, essentially, or dark and light, or in service to God, or in service to fakes that call themselves gods. And so you've got this war in which when they come into a body, it's going to change the body to some degree. If you're in service and you're a good being and service to God, it doesn't change it a massive amount because you're resonant with a good person. But if you're a very, over thousands and millions of years, a very dark being that's been serviced to dark beings, you need a body, a corporeal unit, so to speak, is what they call them, corporeal unit, to fit into, that won't burn up when you come. If it's like in the, what was that Netflix series? The two brothers are fighting all these nasty creatures, supernatural, in which the Satan goes into a body, and the body literally starts to decompose because it can't withstand that level of evil. That level of decrepitation within the body starts to literally disintegrate the body, because disintegrate. You're not integrated with Creator. So you're disintegrating. So everything you go into and everything you touch just falls apart on you. So they make bodies that don't fall apart. Go ahead. Sorry, I have to laugh because it's just so ridiculous. I know it's not like a really fun thing to think about, but it's just, the seeds of evil. Its destruction is within it. The pure nature of evil is got its own seeds of destruction within it. And to see the ridiculousness of the idea that by controlling and manipulating and doing all this darkness, that you're actually just destroying yourself. It becomes, at a certain point, at 8th density and above, you go, wow, that's incredibly ridiculous. And how stupid can you be? And, if you come to Christ, you can but man, you're going to have a long road to hoe to get back, to learn all of the stuff like the Alpha Draconians that went to Christ, all of the stuff they learned that they lost. They're like, wow, were we totally played? We thought we had all of this power and all of this stuff, and we were so played, it is beyond belief. So, they have to laugh at it too. They laugh. I've met a couple of them and they laugh to me about it. They go, thanks for letting us know, but you're right. Sometimes you got to laugh at your own stupidity. Otherwise, you'll just be miserable and cry yourself to death. I go, yeah, you gotta laugh at. We gotta laugh at how stupid we can be sometimes.
That's funny.
Being in service to God, God has an infinite sense of humor, infinitely compassionate, and infinitely patient.
Very good. You can laugh all you want, Gene. This is good. Lemmy, do you have a question?
Yeah, and I wanted to know, since the Gamma Draconians are so powerful beings, basically, how was it possible for the Alpha Draconians to cause so much damage upon them? Like, how did that war go in a little bit more detail, so we get to a better understanding of the warfare techniques that have been used between the two dragon races?
Well, it's the same thing I've experienced in this lifetime within helping people in the last few years and the last 30 years of waking up. We just do not think as good people that love God and love Christ and love each other. And we just want to have our lives and love our families and raise our children and take care of our pets and our property, is enough for us. We don't need to hoard and have all kinds of everything you could ever possibly want. I mean, you got a castle full of 400 rooms of junk you never get to ever see. 290, 390 of those rooms because you don't have time. What do you have all this junk for? So the average human being or the average Gamma Draconian never would have thought that beings could be that ruthless and that hoarding and that evil. You just think that people are good like you. Who would think that you would eat and sacrifice and tear the hearts out of your own? Who would think you would do or change their genetic structure, or torture them to death, or sacrifice your own to some being for power? Why? Why don't you help others? I mean, that's what the nature of humans and the nature of Gamma Draconians. Why don't you help others? Everybody helps everybody. Everybody gains. Would you rather have a whole bunch of people that love you or because you're all working together, you all have essentially an infinite amount of whatever you need? You got an infinite amount of food, an infinite amount of gold. There's so much of it. You can walk into a place and, if it's a place to get food, you walk in and a whole bunch of people run up and go, anything I can help you find? Over here. Could we help you kick that home? You're older, we'll help you carry that home. And so if you had, let's put it in just economic terms, would you rather have 10% tax on somebody who's a billionaire per year, they're making $1 billion a year, or 1% tax, or excuse me, 90%, like the US, 90% of tax on somebody who's making $20,000 a year? What's more? Economically, obviously, the smaller tax on somebody who's making a vast amount more. If everybody on earth were a billionaire and you gave a 14.7% flat tax per year, that is a massively much more income to support countries and cultures and cities and infrastructure than 87% tax on a whole bunch of people that have an average income of $35,000 a year. I mean, impoverishing people to feed off their misery is ludicrous. This is what the Alpha Draco do, and it did not occur at the Gamma Draconian, to literally feed off the misery of others, to create misery so you can feed off of it, because it's much more when people love you and care for you and tell you thank you and really love you as family and everybody. Gamma Draconians pretty much look at the species as their family. The entire species is family. And humans used to have that and they lost it. And the Alpha Draconians forgot if they even ever had that, because they feed off of misery and suffering, because that's what the AI that they serve feeds off of. And so they've lost the entire point of existence itself. And when they just did not, when the Alpha Draco came, just like when they came to this world, the human race did not really think that a species would do that to their own child, to their own children, to their own kind, to others. That they could be that destructive and that horrifically evil, that they would do things to that level of just essentially beyond imagination. So the Gamma Draconians fell into that trap too, of not really perceiving these beings. It's like, my mom gave me a cartoon when I was young. It was the Mongol horde riding up to some little settlement in China or something. Hi, we're the government and we're here to help. Yeah, hi, we're the Alpha Draconians and we're to help. Yeah, how were they here to help Gamma Draconia or the humanity on Earth? Enslave you and feed off everything that you are, everything, and literally get to the point where you have nothing left at all, and then still keep going somehow on getting more off of you. So it's that trick of not understanding that evil can exist for its own sake, that it's just something that a Gamma Draconian or even a real human being cannot really comprehend, that a being can be doing things to you just for the fun of making you suffer and watching you and just taking glee in it. It's like, doesn't make any sense. No one would do that. Yeah, there are those that will do that. So that's how they fell into the war they had, and they realized and threw it off. Humanity still hasn't realized it overall. That's why they have to do what they're doing, in going. Some people are really upset it's taking so long. Humanity can wake up. Can they, without that, without a near-death experience? Not if you're that mind controlled. If you've been mind controlled for 1,000,000 years, more, 200, 300 million, your species has been mind controlled. You don't even know what abundance is like anymore, of not needing a monetary system because there's so much abundance. You don't even understand it. So how can you wake up to the truth of who you are and what it's really like? Because what they're doing is giving you, the human race, and what they do to every planet they take over, is to slowly but surely garden your mind over to their mind of, I need to have for me and mine. And it's mine, like Nemo, mine, mine, mine. And to get that, I have to own. I own my spouse, I own my children, I own this, I own that. You cannot own something you did not create. There's only one creator. Therefore, the only one that owns anything is the creator of all, the one God of all creation. We don't own anything. We're given custodial duties. That's about it. So does that help explain it a little?
Yeah, thank you, Gene.
Okay, Casey, do you have a question?
There. Well, we all know that there's many messages hidden within our entertainment industry, Gene, and you've referenced this many times. I'm just wondering if there are any movies or series that you can recommend that show dragons in their true light. I mean, I think of Avatar and Pete's Dragon and The Hobbit and Dragonheart, and one of my favorites. One of my favorites has always been How to Train Your Dragon. I think it's cute.
That's actually a good one. How to Train Your Dragon, and they show the different types again. It's fairly accurate, although they got them a little bit too stocky when they're stocky, a little too thin when they're thin, a little bit on the small side overall, but it's very accurate. And then you've got, Puff the Magic Dragon song, you've got Pete's Dragon. Lord of the Rings is kind of, what they call a drake or a fire dragon that is kind of an evil type. There are those types in there. And then you'd also have Braveheart, I think it is, that shows dragons pretty accurate. That a long time ago, humans actually helped together with dragons. And that there were people that were literally bonded to a dragon at birth. And then you've got a kind of a Scythian-like dragon that is a good dragon in Waterhorse, which is like Loch Ness Monster, Nessie as they call her and her children, who's a good water type dragon. They're kind, they're generous. If she wasn't, you'd have a lot of ships going down near Scotland. That's not happening. She doesn't take ships down. So there are even still on Earth, very good dragons that are helping humanity that long, long ago used to work hand in hand with humans before they got a bad rap.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay, one thing we wanted to know was why are dragons symbolism so much out there with the Cabal? Why are they latched onto dragons so much?
Because their overlords directly are the Alpha Draco. And because the Alpha Draco have such vast technology and fifth and fourth density, primarily when they came here, they're interdimensional capable. They can do all kinds of things. They have ability to fifth density, have the ability to manifest through the mind. So you can literally manifest something. You can walk through into a solid rock and disappear. You can manifest food for people, or you can manifest pain and suffering and death and plagues. So they became very enamored with them and worshiped them. And so a lot of the beings worshipped represent the Alpha Draco themselves, because they were worshipped. And there were times with various fallen angelics where it's even confused to whom is whom, where you have within the Alpha Draco that were possessed by fallen angelics. So in some of the top Alpha Draco, they are actually some of the top fallen angels as well within them, just like they've been jumping from body to body for the leadership of the British Empire. These fallen angelics have been jumping from body to body within the Alpha Draco. And so some of the beings that people think are a fallen angelic, they're confused. Is it a reptile? It's both. It's a reptile that has, with a fallen angelic, that when that body dies, they jump to the next offspring of that one. The offspring will be breeded for that precise reason. For that being, as that Draco is getting old, that Alpha Draco is getting old, it'll breed a child that'll be the perfect host, so that that fallen angelic can jump into that body. So there's certain beings that most people think is a reptile that was in the garden, for example. And they say, well, no, that's a reptile. It's a snake. No, it's a fallen angelic. No, it's both. And this is the case with most things that you see. People, human beings, and Gamma Draconians, same thing, tend to look at things as white and black. And it's not always. It's almost always all of the above is the correct answer. So if you see, for example, was this certain event done, like let's take 911. Was it done by pyrotechnics, C4, or was it done by nanothermite, or was it done by the trumpet, which is a directed energy weapon that flows down the ley lines like Jericho, where they go make a tone and it flows down the ley lines and where they all come together, which just happened to be where they built the buildings. just so coincidentally happened to be there, makes it able to pull the building down. Was it this? Was it that? It was all of the above. All of the above are true. So, you tend to think, okay, it's this or this or this. It's not or. It's this and this and this and this. So it's not a reptile or a fallen angelic. It's a reptile and a fallen angelic. And then it may later on be a dragon moth. It may later be on a feathered serpent named Quetzalcoatl. It may later be a bullish kind of creature, kind of like the Minotaur. It may be this, it may be that. It jumps. That's what it does. So you look at the back of the dollar bill and there's 72 stones for one fallen angelic because it's been jumping 72 times in the history of humanity. It's had different avatars. It's taken over. So it's saying, is it this? Is it that? It's all of them. So if you're sacrificing to Baal or Moloch, for example, Göbekli Tepe, they know exactly how old it is because when it was conquered, because it was like Sodom and Gomorrah, it was, find me, God goes, if you find one person that's good, you don't have to kill them all. Not one. So they, killed them all because they were sacrificing to the same being's children again from all the surrounding area, just like they were doing on Jekyll Island. The Dan tribe that went to Jekyll Island was doing the same, sacrificing to some reptilian, fallen angelic, merged kind of critter. So they are saying, they took it, the whole population out and they buried the place. It was so bad. God said, bury it. They buried the entire place. And that, when you bury something, you've got all kinds of carbon material in there, plants and that will be able to carbon date when it was buried. And so now that's what they believe is the largest monolithic structure of, our city on Earth. Not even close, of course, but that's why, and Carrie Cassidy goes, what about Göbekli Tepe? Why was it that way? Because it was pure freaking evil. They were doing pure evil like Sodom and Gomorrah. So God told them, just like Moses, go and get rid of them. And they did. And it goes, bury the place, not worth salvaging. So same kind of thing. It's just the mistake of very good people is same with the humans, same with the Gamma Draconians, to think it's this or this. And it can't be that bad. No, it actually can be worse than that. So I hope that explains it a bit.
Yes, thank you. Jacob, you have a question?
Yes, Gene. You said that God created the Alpha Draconians to be the record keepers of the universe, and they acquired all the knowledge. Did God have a different purpose when he created the Gamma Draconians?
Yep. In actuality, the Gamma Draconians were meant to kind of be like the messengers of that information. They were for civilizations that were, when they were ready, like when a species is becoming space capable and they're still what's deemed to be a third generation civilization. They're using fossil fuels, kind of verging into fourth, which is nuclear, to go and take them to free energy, fifth generation, where you're using the Cassini effect and other things like that, where you're getting free energy and all of these things, to share the information that the Alpha Draco maintains, so that when a civilization, and as they also go, is to kind of shepherd species. So like the Agarthans have tried to do somewhat with the surface dwellers, is when vast wars have happened, they come back up and give some basic knowledge, like the basic tools, the screw, the lever, plowing, planting, etc., things like that. So you shepherd civilizations and help them and nurture them along and kind of blend in with them and not make it like to help them, and steer them along their way with basic things that will help improve their civilization, like, the things I mentioned, and irrigation and other things like that.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions before we close? Nope. Okay, Jean, what we would like you to do right now is, could you tell us some of your dragon jokes?
Yeah, sure. My favorite one. I got two, but my favorite one is like a little postcard somebody gave me. It's kind of cute. There's a dragon that went to get, his physical, yearly physical, and the doctor's going, now, when I say, he's all kind of like smoking, his hair's smoking, goes, now, when I say turn your head and cough, in the other direction, please. And then the other one is the Gamma Draconia. Again, the coral dragons are the ones that make humor and not take yourself so serious. The black dragons were very fast flyers. The red dragons breathe fire. The blue dragons breathe ice. And so long ago, when there's a class structure, there's a plane on Gamma Draconia called Asgaroth. It's vast. It's about the size of Russia, because it's a big planet. So they're on this vast plane, and they all are there talking about who's more powerful. Kind of, beings get in that when their civilization is young. And they said, so the black dragon goes, I'll show you true power. So he flies up very, very high, tucks his wings like eagles will do here on Earth, and falls straight to the Earth. And just before he hits the ground, he opens his wings up at Mach 8 and creates a sonic boom that opens up a rift in the plane that's bigger than the Grand Canyon, and lands beside the other ones to say, that's power. That's true power. And the red dragon goes, nothing. He breathes out fire and melts it, and it all fills in with molten rock. That's true power. The blue dragon, nothing. He breathes ice and it's solid rock again. He goes, that's true power. And then the coral dragon goes, ha, and he farts and they all pass out. And he flies away. You guys take yourself way too serious. So it's kind of how they got out of that class structure. Don't take yourself too serious. Enjoy life. Stop focusing on who's more powerful or who's smarter or who's better or who's bigger or who's whatever. Just take care of your loved ones and love each other and be kind and help everybody. Stop being so serious. Have some humor, like God, whose humor is infinite.
That's great. That's great. Thank you for that. Jean, we want to thank you for doing this with us tonight and telling us all about dragons. It was fantastic. We loved every bit of it. We hope to be doing more of these Jean Unscripted, and we look forward to doing that again. So thank you very much, and thank you for everybody that came to our session today.
Thank you, and God bless.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
Bye.